Hello, America. YouTuber Anthony Wall. How could I know more than the the sciences experts individually grouped them together? For example, no one has said simultaneously what is actually recorded where they put black slash white, which is all exception nature involved with that method. That took Native Americans against Native Americans to sustain that. Not just to say it was sustain hurt, it was sustaining what no one was paying attention to, while having to react as fact cheaping nature increasingly only afforded sabotage of ancient reception of the sciences of this course by why and how we have black pupils and white survives. Why and how we use the invisible but still discernible. Where and how, we do more than measure with space slash existence and be as it. We are being as physics, as metaphysics, and as identity, distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously, and further hyper simultaneously, which there is a need to discern that and how there is a further distinct identity of simultaneous nature. There, and there are exceptions in exception nature and on demonstration of how it is in demonstration the same thing simultaneously being about exception nature. So, for example, there is only what is hyper additive to and as one identity of perfect value slash value progression since before matter. And so, first, one theory is that before there was night and light, darkness and light, there was only clear and hyper clear. But it had already made three identities of relationship to itself as the phenomenon of how it made and is making increasing amounts of temporary identities of itself, where how an extent of complete possession over and as the one identity distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously as space and existence and a slash between them as three bound manifest demonstrations of how to discern also. For example, there are one slash three slash five distinct identities of sequence slash simultaneous nature. Each one of them is also a trinity. And this is the reason there is the halo and there are the letters on both sides of it with cipher slash decipher, relevant to the physics of the religious books, text, subject slash s, no, in existence slash space. That which is greater than us and more finite than us, while distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously being itself that way. It is simultaneously, distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously is itself, where and how it is our way, as a quality of diffusion, as a value slash value progression, where its complete nature, relevant to where and to how Earth has a concentrated value relationship with consciousness and at the location. We're through 3 years. or 1/3/5 years can be demonstrated to as consciousness of how and why more and more forever nature can be made, is being made as one by one hyper identity of volume. It's only increasing identity of relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that, which are equally increasing relevant to where and to how we are in, well, as this which we became additive to, because there is one hyper additive identity of value / value progression, and what is multiplicative or divisive is exception / exception nature, and demonstration of the same thing /s. So this is not just for the Trinity, is cipher / decipher. Adam and Eve are simultaneously, each one individually is simultaneously a sequence / simultaneous nature, differentially hypercritically, and automatically as positive, automatically as a positive value nature progression, automatically as the value of that as temporary positive to an extent, but that can be and is still being formally in collusion with all that informal, criminally foreign influenced, criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and of negative treatments, which are simultaneously identity treatments. And so we discern the value of having the names of definitions of words. Definitions are identities of volume, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Not just as states of themselves with the one definition with multiple sub-definitions. This one, the one identity of hyper-simultaneous, again, it is hyper-additive. It is hyper-generating more of its one identity of volume from inside itself, where and how one identity of more and more forever nature, complete. The extent and the increasing extent and the increasing value of the extent and the increasing value of the identity of itself as its extent of possession over all parts of space / existence as we are a body with a whole bunch of cells, a whole bunch of organs, systems, all semi-nature relationships to our complete nature. Those who teach English, we need to speak like this. This is how English was revealed to be spoken. Ancients had a sophistication that was greater than and was more finite than the natures of sophistication known now. I mean, then the sciences became criminally foreign influenced, all because English is also reliant upon the other languages being distinct, non-distinct and simultaneous, because the value of that is to have the identity of the hyper-simultaneous, its identity of relationship to itself. And the only increasing value of that is that system no one can invent. It shows we could be systems other as one species. That's the only reason it lasted so long. And because they coupled the phenomena of a breaching method against countries A through Z, therefore against people of countries A through Z, and against their leaderships, identities sickly distinctly, and it effectively kept how sickly non-distinctly self-valued through how it kept used remotely. Roles with one identity of corruption that no one wanted. Forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded. Needed to be responded to by the people at the locations, areas, and states of all modern locations, sequentially, effectively per plan that showed it needs to maintain and maintains remote possession over all identities of sophistication / non-sophistication, therefore syntactical, fact-cheap nature, qualities and aspects, roles, natures, needs. For example, all this time, overtly, what has actually been recorded is that and how they assigned what Native American means. They assigned what black / white means. That means all exceptions, nature. They assigned human nature's course to roles to be used remotely, not just by colonization, but colonization used remotely from semi-ancient times. Prepare your minds, because each age of in nature of sophistication as sciences locations, they are abridged, and that's self-valued, and that's being and having been used remotely. One of the ways they get away with this is by lying about their own passions and emotions and the value of that, and they're lying about the passions and emotions of others, and preventing a quality of fact-cheaping nature that deals with sequence nature, and which is actually simultaneously recorded at all locations. They are consciously, this breaching method knew that the certain type of victim people A through Z would be, all identity of the ground locations further, as the identities rolls with them further, rolls with any industry at the time when those colonial industries, it was a breach. They were a breaching method applied. So they had slavery, North and South. Rather than value that as positive, that's also positive unto itself, as means to discern the invisible but still discernible, and the hyper invisible but still discernible breaching method /S. Through uses of the breaching method, a singular use, a singular usage. What is actually recorded is where and how each individual of each branch of government, all exception nature tied to them, each member of overt criminal enterprises, as they claim themselves to be, and or as they have been they've been grouping criminal enterprises wrong, which is one of the simultaneous revelations stemming from the revelation that and how what we are told really caused slavery in America is other than what we are told simultaneously. And that is measured and maintained through our own as means to measure and maintain uses of reactions, non-reactions, and worse. And so these things were colluded against people at each age in nature. So where we are not at the same time around our family members of each age in nature, like when they're in elderly homes, and or like when they're in grammar schools. These locations have families associated with that certain kind of victim predator originally instilled that never went away, where the courts were backed into being and defending treatments of A, therefore B, and leaving out the value of it, the sequence true, leaving out the value of the individual grouped and all kinds of natures of corruption associated with those locations originally instilled. So George Washington was quoted regarding how we had bending the moral arc, because George Washington and our other founding parents did not have free speech. He had to leave slavery entrenched North and South America, but when they were, even after it was America, 1822, the Institute of Living was founded in 1822 with people that were multi-front against slavery, syntactically, and for it, syntactically inclusion with it, as a raise, relevant to where and to how there was the complete fact, treatment, nature, remote possession of colonies A through Z, by that which had been sustained since before our founding parents were even born, before their founding parents were even born, and against the Native Americans, which enabled an additional identity of worth to founders who had to hide their actual roles, furthering the counter extortion of everyone who was already extorted, and way worse. There is not one identity of system or industry that was not affected syntactically, therefore functionally, by some of them having been in roles with sick things like that, sickly distinctly, not just against black, white, sickly distinctly against everything that would be called white or black, to where simultaneously, where these have natural ties to our instances, syntactically too, and functions, originally and still parallel to this, are those assignments and uses of those assignments that have nothing to do with those syntactical narratives that were forced by the breaching method to pretend what it was causing was blamed on other things. They were blamed on prejudice. These people are going to start gaining consciousness. A unity is going to start forming. Hurt them. Simultaneously show them, everyone's being and having been used remotely. Your physical delusions. So I'm not a doctor, not a police force, not a criminal. It is recorded that doctors, psychology, especially ones with badges, originally and still, people of mental health. The reason they got away with this too, is relevant to where and how individually grouped it together. Every individual of each branch of government is having been used remotely, backed into uses of positive and negative, as criminal insidiousness, natures of positive and negative, where and how they are being and having been employed to keep hurt at all locations, areas, and states real, to keep victim fact treatment natures needing to counter things like criminal insidiousness, people like criminal insidiousness as a nature, as identities, individually grouped and together. The species body / individual is a body of individuals, because it is where and how it can't be. It's itself the way it's only going to increasingly be itself, but the way that is hyper generating more and more of its complete volume from the method of having them distinct identities of relationship to itself that are working together like the 5 distinct identities of sequence / simultaneous nature, therefore simultaneously bound 3 ways while they are bound 5 ways. The identities of the cell nuclear, cell body, cell wall, 2 identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. Additional to that with the additional and hyper addition / hyper additional evolution module. So we are, for example, to put it in computer terms. Hello, how are you doing, Barbara? How are you? You said the messenger the other day. I don't know how the message machine. I don't know if message works on YouTube. I look around. I don't find these functions. And sometimes it may be that some people have different functions than others. For maybe they downloaded YouTube at a different time. The YouTube. So black and white were applied. Black / white. The identities of physical culture were applied. Meanings and uses other by a singular breaching method. A singularly hyper additive, hyper archetypal criminal enterprise. And I'm not a lawyer, but there are proofs that there are crime methods, there are predicate acts methods that are greater than and more finite than wars, through wars. And they demonstrably were and are cause to syntactically manifest phenomenon relevant to phenomenon of that breaching method. It is distinctly, not distinctly, and simultaneously inseparable from the narratives we have heard that have told us about history, that have told us about the sciences, and where and how they're making positive or negative treatments. So to cook, the fire is hot. Everything is, there is hot and there is cold. Not to be in demonstration of the warmth, to be in demonstration of the simultaneous. It is simultaneously to be in demonstration of / the hyper simultaneous. Because the hyper simultaneous, everything can't help but be hyper simultaneous. And its identity of relationship to itself, or positive or negative, as a perfect value progression system, as something that could lead, as an identity that can lead us. A calculator is a singular identity that can lead all kinds of our questions to measurements, answers. See, but computers cannot mimic the method we have as consciousness to sense and to discern. See, all exceptions, exception nature. All time treatments simultaneously too fast, too slow. They go over the quality of fact treatment nature needed, implied by honesty actual regarding topics like slavery, regarding any country's history. So this method knew that the breaching method, having been, would continually be an increasing value to the subjects in every modern country's histories before they were even countries, which was forced, only capable of being through alliances with other countries individually grouped and together. Now tactically ulterior from how we are actually by nature individuals of the species individual, and how group difference, ages, areas, sexes. It's all in demonstration. We follow the system that goes, the human volume system, how it is distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, how it is non-distinctly the same one. We go by that. Otherwise, negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures are revealed rather than evolution's fruits and gifts, positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. This method knew syntactically, therefore functionally, how we are manifest, therefore how we would be manifest. So it has a certain nature of, so it has weaponized fact-cheaping nature. They made the wrong outcome /S in all cases relevant to what, where, and how they left out what is actually being and having been recorded. Because this is also, since before computers, a method that used instances, a method that used databases, a method that used memory, and that used active sequence relationships, active simultaneous value relationships to consciousness. This was a scary, scary, scary slavery method, sickly, distinctly against every single person, no matter who you are. No matter, they made it sickly, distinctly black, consciously, knowing that when we had conversations about color, we have black pupils and white eyes. There is an identity of hypersimultaneous. There is an identity of relationship to itself and to the simultaneous. That is, it is demonstrating to us to understand the importance of understanding how sequences value as a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. For example, so we are 1/3/5 bound identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. So there are 5 while there are 3. And this is how /3. This is how there are exception nature and demonstration of how we are hyper additive to that which is the complete that was and is distinctly onto itself, where it is not juxtaposed with matter. The identity of value / value progression that generated matter, which was generated by the increasing value of its identity of relationship to itself and of its volume and of the value of that simultaneously. This is also how it is hyper invisible, but so still discernible, so functional. This is also relevant to where it is invisible, how it is actually invisible, but still discernible, so functional. So really how the subjects are subjects are value. Really how verbs are value. All parts of English. One identity of volume has conjunction, has hyperconjunction to the definite article, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously from how it has hyperconjunction onto while as further hyperadditively a and an, the indefinite articles. Note finite in the word definite and indefinite. So the is the indefinite article. We know how we use it, the, with English. I mean, the definite article. The is the definite, the individual article. and for example, A and N, before a word has a vowel, the letters of the English language, they have a distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to themselves that is better than living and is only increasing while we are here, even once we are all gone. Heaven and hell, for example, are scientific variables that were semi-preserved by modern religions. For example, and noting there are arrays of a reception of the Bible / S, and how and why there are distinct ones, and how and why there is the significance of the value of that. But to people involved with the emotions and passions towards that are recorded and involved with, like everyone else, offensively, preemptively, and from the past having been shown, needs not to be able to afford all that is actually simultaneously observable from being discerned. To know how a person could be divisive or they could be unifying. And always note that they could be, everything is simultaneously at the same time. Because there are 5 distinct identities of sequence / simultaneous nature that are positive. And where and how they're not being valued positive together, no matter what the crazy laws say, even if everyone thinks they're not crazy, like they're crazy when you have the black, white treatments, native treatments, don't have the Constitution afforded unabridged, equality of fact, human nature, provided to individuals, forced groupthink, no, still by that too. Mandated laws offensively demonstrated to ourselves at the youngest ages, prevented. How they kept us motivated. In other words, for example, Highcrest School in Wethersfield, Connecticut. There are schools in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and in Hartford and Rocky Hill, and other cities that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles, even with younger grades, with uses of those locations, uses of a method where they're putting fake things in databases. And it only takes one of them to do it. And it's also per remote uses of each age of fact, human nature, sickly distinctly, including their kids, everyone's neighbors. This is a method that uses the sense and sensibilities of people, pretending that they don't understand others too. When they bring up interactions with ourselves, with themselves. They interbranch, but where and how they are criminally foreign influence differentially, increasingly. It is where and how people A through Z are kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, finite, active, progressive lies, and styles and needs to pretend other. Some with strangers, increasingly at all locations, areas, and states, criminally foreign influence. We should have all known that phrase relevant to what caused slavery. What caused slavery was criminally foreign influence, faked identity of the law voices, faked nature of the law voices, and faked wisdom and honesty by the value of what is actually simultaneous, what is actually experienced or experience, or the value of that which is actually empirical. This showed you where and used remotely all these other identities of corruption were caused by the breaching method. And we know that other was blamed, leaving that out. When you examine it, other was blamed exactly the way it needed it to be kept out. It needed to be people that be blaming things. Even so, well, that's one of the things that is that's one of the things that is variably, not constantly, racism. That breaching method put distinctly everyone, victim, predators, everyone's fighting with each other now, simultaneously not watching, defending quality of fact cheating nature that can't afford, that can't be to afford a quality of fact cheating nature that could counter criminal insidiousness. A phrase that would be, the breaching method knew would be increasingly valuable to every identity of the ground, location, further every location's science's voices. And it knew it would have all locations. See, we can't blame the corruption we can observe how individually grouped and together each country's branches of government, with the exception nature tied to them, not just the people databases wise and tied. The databases tie parts with this, and all that was used remotely through a filter by what was worse and is worse originally still, relevant to the multi-front maintenance, to what kept and keeps each identity of each age, of each location's formal/informal identity grounds, voices, including the branches of government individually grouped together, how used remotely. Native time treatment simultaneously too fast, simultaneously too slow to get over on. When I say forever nature, is because this is how correlation, this is how we use, this is, in other words, temporary/lasting positive are in demonstration of one identity's constant some things it is that which is hyposimultaneous, that is constantly, and there are some things that it is variably. And this is what nature is nature, and the value of its nature and of its nature's ability to be distinct. In other words, the people that would take that enforced the evil of those crazy breaching method /S laws that were entrenched in America and in other modern countries before our founding parents were even born. The suburbs were designed to cause, they had slavery North and South America by different remotely used identities of countries. It wasn't just England and Africa grouped that were involved with remote uses of the colonies. Everyone has fact cheating nature slaves. Because, when one person is fact cheating nature slave, part of the system, everyone's system's not the one that's hypernative. It's going to cause negative nature, progressive action nature. And syntactically, it made fake exceptions. It made, okay, well, it was blamed on wealth. They did it because of this. So the proverbial North and the proverbial South were forced to fight. They were forced to be groups, the same way our founders / counter founders. I mean, our our founders had to hide their actual roles with the plan to get up, where and how they were going to get the Constitution to say unabridged, and get everyone to say that it's supposed to be all free speech, and get people to say that Marbury versus Madison should mean, quote, real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice, unquote. In other words, we're in a semi-ancient track, and they pretend that Americans have conspiracy theories. They already did this on a mass scale. They painted themselves in corners with databases, with a justification of their logic, pretending they have fear to justices when they say they don't want to be litigating from the bench. In other words, you guys are obligated to litigate from the bench because you guys were backed into using weapons the same way the overt criminal enterprises were overtly / insidiously recorded, kept needing to have the same sequence, finite, active, progressive lies and styles of lying and pretending others are liars. Only getting away with it too because everyone had replaced the integrity of fact, human nature, reception at each age of fact, human nature sickly distinctly. This kept collusions between campuses of each age of nature that were there before, and then while all those known bonds between themselves and between the off-campuses locations, conjunctions, as that which is part of, quote, known and unknown, unquote, and, quote, groupthink, unquote. And also that which is hyper-evidential is where and how there is still collusion with the breaching method that religious books were designed to help counter and to overcome. There is collusion with its stewards, differentially, but increasingly, and that's used remotely. So we have to deal with the actual premises treatments too. But there's sabotage to the reception of the first part of the Old Testament, where it's about sciences and where it's about the invisible but still discernible, and where it's about the part where we're supposed to write this part. And the first part of the Quran is also is speaking about and for nature offensively being prevented, while simultaneously it is speaking about sequence and physics in the uses of its name. I mean, the uses of the identity of the hyper-simultaneous name. Either the person's going to, or group is going to agree to use the name Allah or not. So no. So there is sabotage to the dictionary. The dictionary has not evolved. It was reinvented as roles used remotely as victim predators, as pseudo sophistication /s that were applied to where and how nature would it could show nature to locations, means, needs, times, tight sequence shit, 5-act progressive lies, illusions, delusions, identity theft, fraud, slander, roles. One thing America history is a perfect world, and that which is greater than the perfect world, and that which is more finite than the perfect world, while it is generating more of itself as the perfect world. And this is where and how our founders can tell no lies. All rise, because the people who run computers know it's only about positive or negative in memory of that, relevant to the circuits, relevant to the voltage going to the little parts, less than the circuit is capable of. In other words, they assign relativity of temporary positive things, temporary / lasting positive, or negative, or neutrality. Neutrality relevant to where and how neutrality is simultaneously a distinct identity of positive. Every identity of everything simultaneously has the complete identity of volumes, the complete identity of the hyper simultaneously present and not present. It has the value of that only increasing, which means positive or negative. But this is not just to, it is to all parts individually grouped together, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. And it can't be invented, but it can be received. Ancient gaming system, but none believed. So, in other words, evolution science should only feel like game / s. Wherever there is I tell it best, wherever there is a war manifest. Simultaneously, this is also why, for example, where there are markets, positions, where there are commodities, things are giving economic value treatments. Our founders left us to demonstrate how the slavery system had been sustained against Native Americans A through Z, against colonists A through Z, sickly distinctly, and still sickly distinctly against Americans A through Z, forced to fight a civil war to discern the identity of revolution and to be that course capable of defending religious rights and of the other rights of the Constitution simultaneously, let alone defense of treatments of their opinion. When people say their opinions are regarding their own emotions or other people's emotions, because this breaching method knew that emotions only work functionally relative to that which is hyper simultaneous. See, but where that requires a quality of fact human nature, that the breaching method knew. It simultaneously made and already had made by people itself before itself. In other words, people blaming other things other than ourselves, what it caused. Was it, and that cause was increasingly causing more of that. In other words, all we have to do is admit That in other words, these are things that are positive. We all agree. Why are we using the value nature systems that were employed in identity ground? Why are we killing ourselves, straining ourselves when we could just admit syntactically the ground before our feet, countries A through Z, it was influenced by a breaching method designed syntactically to have people use positive and negative treatments as criminal incidents, positive and negative treatments, timed, because they knew simultaneously that's identity treatments. Because that's how, not just how computers work, every definition in the dictionary is distinct identity of volume, where volume equals value as nature / nature as value. And it can't help it because of one identity of volumes, complete relationship to itself, being distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously that which interacts with us. In other words, that we cannot be, but that we can access the means of, because we are simultaneously and additionally to a quality of diffusion this way. It is very powerful where and how. 3 years or 1,095 days. And where and how one identity of sequence nature it has how it is 3/5 generating more and more of that as more and more 1 to infinity natures, identities, as the same identities onto the same increasing identity of volume. We increase, then go away because we are distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously itself. It is making more of itself from inside of itself. It is a complete possession of all parts of its body as space / existence, as that which is greater than that and more finite than that, while being that too. When we lay it out on paper, the ancient snow people, they show how computers work. It is memory of positive or negative. It is assignment of what those values mean that are other than what they actually mean. But then to have them mimic that which we have been, that the elements of how we receive, we know sequence, finite, active, progressive data, and identity as data itself / hyper identity. So this is sequence / data / evidence / identity reception / identity the ground reception, because the value of that is why in other words, these are distinct ways. It is invisible but still discernible. Seek the value of sequence truth, since before the order of the finite grouped and together details of the republic for which we stand, America. Note there are other ancient republics. People attribute Rome as or America or their own country as the identity of the republic, rather than the unabridged Constitution, which we could sense, because it's simultaneously supposed to be a parallel, additional, for our correlation nature / hypercorrelation nature. And so, with math, things could be divisive or multiplicative, but that is as exception nature and demonstration of that which is hyperadditive to itself, per how and why it really wants and needs us to think this way. In many places, I'm not a journalist. The ancients' English was revealed to teach better. Who, what, where, why. Who, what, where, how, why. I mean, who, what, where, how, and when are temporary values, and why is a constant value. And this is relevant to the reception of the hyper invisible, but still discernible. Not just the invisible, but still discernible. Overtly / insidiously in our faces, offensively prevented the quality of fact, human nature, and the functions by our needs actually and properly when to be and how to become, which is also invisible / hyper invisible. It takes contemplation, and how to be aggressive verbally, fact, human nature oriented. Because if we can't do this, we can't prevent wars. See, wars were employed where and how. Treatments of positive and negative / negative as collusion against everyone's self-value for that certain kind of victim predator reaction / S, for how it is multi-front at each age and nature of campus, private database relationships, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. See, this also shows where and how criminal insidiousness is really from another source. And there is another method / S by it. And nature shows this. See, but we have our free speech prevented offensively. They do this by stacking roles with names, forging and switching interbranch. And where and how these are the same families that have been locked into roles with a whole bunch of different countries. And so identity theft, fraud, slander roles. There's a Joshua Julian, and there's a Phil Colo, and there are people with the name Christine involved with a Connecticut Whiting's forensics place, involved with their patients and criminals before they even got caught, and other people on off the state judicial branch offices, on off the state prison offices, on off military locations, military police, on off campuses, kept showing needing to hide life progressions preemptively and simultaneously from the past, as each age and nature of their campuses, of their families, and where and how really people justify and are actually recorded, blaming on other things, others themselves, really why. In other words, these are not really our means. The identity ground locations for our elderly across the country, let alone where they are the most forsaken humanity. It was built. These cities were built relative to that which was entrenched for the breaching slavery method, nor sickly distinctly north and south, where they made the suburbs only capable of causing negative value nature progression of nature, demonstrating negative value nature progressions, acts of nature being caused by the identity of the ground, the identity of the relationship to itself as a fake system, and as systems other than our syntax, than that which was already having been hypersyntactically conjunctive to humanity, as it had actually been here since before, you know, we have self-valued, criminally foreign influenced readings of American history and of what is A, therefore B. Like, for example, it is more probable and is more practical to convict and or to opine or theorize that the Native Americans had been led by nature's identity of relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that until they had been separated by a breaching method that separated them from their original education and forced them to retreats and into divisions and into unities syntactically that could not defend themselves and even afford themselves to use the short words because of the revelations and the relevant to the senses of the sense and sensibilities of everyone. The second you hear black/white or anything, Native American, there's a breaching method, invisible, singular breaching method is there, whether you just sense it or what. And it's sickly, distinctly against everyone. And everyone blamed other things, ourselves, dishonestly for it. We know we have to look at why simultaneously, how people got away with pretending, well, that's the we're arguing. That's the end of the day. That's the loss. You know what I mean? We need to figure it out here. We have interbranch forging and switching names. They've been offensively with their kids, locking people, locked into themselves by others too. Everyone forced to speak to others, preventing writing. Same people involved with they have Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. They're over there. Everyone's a certain kind of victim that was employed to defend their role, speaking for positive or negative, where and how it gets away, and how is relevant to not just where and when and how it does things, but how it gets away with it too. So leading up to the World Trade Center attack, leading up to Sandy Hook, even and especially if it was made up, there are various courts and lawyers and locations and names associated with Sandy Hook, Newtown, associated with the fire department, associated with the prison there, that have been involved with database crimes, wire crimes, roles with WFSB, Fox Connecticut News, NBC Connecticut News, with people on and off, all the identity. When did the FBI have integrity? Therefore, look at the treatments of the nature of the law. When you look at a picture of New York City, when you look at a picture of a suburb, north or south, where slavery had been, since before cars, no. Since before our founding parents were even born, no. George Washington, he would most probably demonstrably want us to say he wants to come running from his grave to defend the perfect world, to defend it, because there is what is greater than and more finite than the perfect world. That shows us where it went and how to reveal its fruits and gifts yet found. It's all gathered around vaccines. It teaches things belong. So there's a whole lot of time to say simple things. For example, they use time simultaneously, too fast, too slow. Computers are perfect memory of sequence relativity to positive and negative and simultaneous, and distinct identities are simultaneous. Classes, lists, they're assigned values. So just like a letter is assigned the additional values simultaneously when we type it on a keyboard, they don't say it that way because the sciences were inherited abridged. So defenses of themselves as victims, A through Z, locations A through Z further, and then further A through Z inclusion again. So we have not just used remotely all identities of corruption, individually grouped together with an order to it, but also have it bound through another order, therefore syntactically, perceptively, as manifest. Identities of positive/negative as identity treatments. So when you could discern relativity to positive or negative in sequence and simultaneously, one could discern identity in that which is hyper additional to it, and or multiplicative or divisive to it. But even that is invisible but still discernible. So it can't be discerned as that which is hyper simultaneous, hyper invisible, but so still functional, but can be used. In other words, and even the hyper visible but still discernible. We have to contemplate that to know if we're really causing positive or negative. And simultaneously, we have to use observation of the ground's identity of relation to itself. This hyper simultaneous actually recorded. See, but this is now through the foundation of modern countries, each was set upon below it and more finite than itself, the foundation of a breaching method, human fact, human nature breaching method. I refer to it as human fact, human nature, because you have not heard your human nature referred to honestly. All exceptions and exception nature are in demonstration of the same thing. So WFSB has programs through decades that are involved with the FBI and CIA and other state police, Weathersfield Police, Rock Hill Police, fire departments, their family members. These people, I know that person works at the college. Oh, that person works there. Sense and sensibilities. Use of corners of streets. So, it's clear as day, overtly / insidiously, how they have only criminal insidiousness natures of positive / negative treatments allowed to be voiced with passions and emotions behind them at any location where people are going to be heard, at each age, sickly, distinctly. And this breaching method knew that it would need other people with to have the same, to have other motivations apparent, even if not real, because it's going to use everyone needing to self value. Which is being done only A, therefore B logic, opinions, pretending they don't realize the value of exceptions and of exception nature. Because we can't fake the real one. And so we could discern who's lying to us. And relevant to where and how it becomes manifest with other subjects treatments. Even if you're in a town if you're in a classroom, your classroom never had anybody who's black, and that's brought up by people who are white charged, like KKK themed, and then the people that are speaking about themselves as white, pretending not KKK themed. Well, I'm just speaking about myself as white because that's who we are. In other words, there's a certain kind of stupid that people A through Z should stay. Oh, but it's just comedy. It's not comedy. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. We know that we have been prevented free speech since founding unless we're fake. And so the only reason they get away with this is because they have multi-front, individually grouped and together, extorted. Each age of uses of sciences, identities individually grouped and together. Now, it already had that sustained through other motivations, natures, needs, interests, needing to sense, to hurt, correlation, that nature that would sense and voice, demonstrate quality of fact-cheating nature being prevented by a whole bunch of qualities of fact-cheating nature, natures of criminal instances, natures like wrongdoers, wrongdoing itself, having been employed at all locations, areas, and states, even science's locations, differentially, especially critically, which is relevant to where and how. CARE is its complete volume, that's also positive onto that, its complete volume system, or not, is increasingly relevant / hyper relevant, because while we're ignoring it, lethal Hadith is being forced space nature transfer. See, but these were systems since before our founders were even born that were value systems, specifically knowing they were going to be ones and were ones and were forcing roles with it, tactically ulterior to how we are value systems per nature, and where it uses, where and how. What is positive or negative to memory is value to it, because it is an identity of memory. All the distinct identities of memory as the microchips, the main CPU, additional memory that can be plugged into a USB port, SD card, etc. Locations, positive or negative, and memory of that. Temporary / lasting positive is the truth of what it is substantially before it is, and while it is distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. The same reasons, but less though. Even when it's more why and how relevant to a clock cycle, which is only part of the temporary. See, there are answers that nature demonstrates the answers to, but we have been separated from. and have not yet heard an identity that can tell no lies, speaking for the law, the nature of the law, and at locations. So therefore, at all court locations still are witch trials locations being and having been breaching method, human fact, human nature slavery method employed. Needing to screen that too. Fear is wisdom. If slavery is in a state of a body, so you guys have only heard criminal insidious natures of positive and negative treatments. Increasingly, those people speaking for positive humanity as people, all systems other than our natural course. There's all kind of collusions and methods and natures of organized crime that grammar school kids conform, confess, demonstrate, record, confirm, rolls with against strangers and with people that from schools before that and after that, and then their uses of that. They're painting whole fake things into databases. So, someone give me a response. See Renaissance. They've been using remotely the sense and sensibilities of the Fox News judges. And for example, sequentially, with through elections, uses of Judge Napolitano, Facebook page, and readings of statutes criminally foreign influenced by the police forms that have been misinforming judges, but also how with other judges. So we have to address how the courts themselves stage originally instilled criminally foreign influenced, simultaneously delusions raw, simultaneously incapable of affording emotions their function by that which is actually simultaneously valued. And how it is valued, / how it is valued. So we cannot leave out how they were victim predators since they were kids, with the overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and that insidiousness of people's opinions, A through Z, how kept needing to hide. Each age of the fact achieving age, right to location sequentially, things preemptively and simultaneously from the past. This is what is actually recorded. So they paint fake instances, arrays. So now they can't, now the people with the intelligence community associated with computers, they can't afford to discern what was going down with the rackets, with the uses of juxtaposed natures of what is slavery once it's discerned various ways, regardless of the interbranch or the people or the overt criminal enterprise or private, simultaneously, a whole bunch of different things. And in other words, why didn't we know about those crazy laws about everyone else? Too. How sickly distinctly. See, it made identities of A, therefore B simultaneously, increasingly. No, they had to pretend they didn't realize such things that are actually evident, hyper evidential. So there are complete possession. There are criminally foreign influence, dishonest, positive and negative treatments as the identities that are allowed to speak for each of the sciences. One of the ways this stayed, we never countered it, even though everyone wants to counter it, is by uses of how it's relevant, increasingly valuable to understand how all locations are used and were used. And then that was further used at all of their locations, specifically to make other natures of corruption then shown needs to hide at simultaneous means to get away with that at locations as collusion slash S with that original breaching method causes for negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and rolls with the original illusions it employed to be self-valued by others. So we self-value going to outer space, leads of IDs. We self-value negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures formally, as we are spoken forth by others, as America, as other countries. Countries going to space, you guys are out of your minds. Our species doesn't want this. You see, but the species out of minds because everyone had the campuses. Everyone left out criminal foreign influences. And because if they didn't, when they didn't, they were blaming other things, others, ourselves, even when correctly, exactly the way the breaching method wanted, needs, and uses remotely. It's not simultaneously just because they need money. Why and how the only people that will afford their time to go help elderly in elderly homes. In other words, this is worse than just being a hyper rat trap. It's not even, and then further made a hyper humanity trap. So in other words, all we have to do is count a little simple hyper rat trap, and the humanity trap goes away. That which hurts us non-distinctly. Forgiveness is not to give up. The people who want to counter each other in war with war, people who are desperate have no other choice for war. It's right there, our whole species body, waiting to help, and capable of being led by that one thing that will lead us. We have to be a nature that can adapt. We start putting down a foundation here, we realize, oh, we have to do this. We have to be able to step out with no problems. If someone really cared about economic stability of the markets, you would address how originally instilled. They can't defend their logic and afford the hyper-simultaneous used. Exceptions in exception nature, for example, where and how it is increasingly relevant. Where and how those sick things that can't be entertained and the Constitution unabridged were entertained. Our founders left us to explain that. But we have to put it together. Now, thank God, the executive branch and the judicial branch, they confessed and recorded. They use a crime method, I can tell you over at a time. Otherwise, they catch you with it, wherever it hits you. They make you call them names. And then while they have been fabricating audio and video into their database at their locations, at others' locations, certain kind of victim predator, people A through Z stayed, blaming other things, others, ourselves, for what the breaching method knew what nature would continue to demonstrate to each identity of consciousness. And that's what it is critical to understand where and how black and white was assigned values that had nothing to do with their original values. Sense and sensibilities were and are assigned values that have nothing to do with their course, their value progression system perfect relative to this is relative to where and how. Neutrality is a distinct identity of positive. But it's not just to where and to how we are individual grouped and together. It's not just where and how all the other made up of cells identities around the globe of Earth. Distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to the rest of space/existence, being our distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous identity of relationship to itself. Here at Earth, where it can demonstrate the consciousness, where and how 3 years are the phenomena of being temporary, bound, but of an increasing value, temporary. All exceptions, exception nature, are in demonstration of the same thing. And if that's not, when that's not valued, for example, it is forced value from here, forced away, leaves of IDs. Think of the monies spent to go to outer space, while and how from countries A through Z, we're still in that rat trap in the suburbs, designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts of nature since before cars, let alone in the cities. Science never spoke for New York City. So we're going to have to deal with hyper journalism as a means. We're not licensed journalists. They employed the identities of experts of the sciences, abridged to pretend other, and then paint themselves in corners, which they already did, and then hide that per roles with the uses of a predicate acts delivery system method /S that is fact, should be nature oriented. Here. So gang. We have to have enough people listening to me at once. Otherwise, they just keep using the interbranch locations to put more fake things to hide. They keep planting more evidences at locations. They keep having to do and to value roles of the worst things, even wars. Whole bunch of sick, fake integrity identities, value wars now, because it was, they never spoke for war sanely from the past. They didn't even speak for revolution. How could they speak for war? Vaccines. Be sure. I teach you long. Hey, who trains? Come on.